The root of all money. Evil. I could have said language. Where does the word evil come from? Language. I did another piece recently talking about the root and origin of the word devil and the root and origin of the word vilify. In this piece, we'll be talking more about money, but in the process of talking about money, we'll be talking about language, propaganda, and this whole idea of what is considered evil in particular places and particular times, at least for particular people. Like the analogy I'll start with is with a small child. We would discourage a child from putting metal objects in the power outlet, right? We would discourage a child from getting too close to the edge of a cliff. We could startle the child and say, do not go near that power outlet with that fork, or never take the fork, keep the fork away from that. Or if they were approaching the side of a cliff or some physical danger like that, we could say, stay back here, stay at least this far away from the cliff. So those are all just interactions to discourage someone from particular behavior, and that is actually very relevant to this linguistic term evil and the influence of behavior that is behind the use of the term evil. So it's going to be a while before I come back to the subject of evil, but I will. The main subject of this is money, and if you are looking at the blog page, you will see quite a few pictures of old coins as well as casino tokens. And briefly, what I'm saying is casino tokens are good at the casino that issued them and anyone else who takes them. Coins are also good within a system. Anyone who will take them for a particular exchange of something else, then it's useful for them. So coins were created just like casino tokens by particular operators for the purposes of that organization. Just like casinos create casino tokens for people to use within their casino. Court systems and currency systems are created where people will use the particular coin created by that currency system or court system. Same thing applies to paper money, such as a silver certificate or a dollar bill or anything else, even paper checks and financial contracts. Those are all enforced. Those are all enforced by currency system, by court systems. Sorry, all those paper instruments are enforced by court systems through the use of organized violence to conduct things like evictions, foreclosures, repossessions, garnishments, levies, seizures of property, and so on. The very last image in this blog is a silver certificate issued by the United States of America. That's prior to the Federal Reserve System, which began in 1913. That little piece of paper could be taken to various affiliates of the United States of America, various branch offices, and could be exchanged for $1 silver. It says payable to the bearer on demand, $1 silver. So the silver certificate is a coupon good for the exchange of that piece of paper for an actual silver dollar, which is a coin made of silver, issued by the United States of America in this particular case. That system of the United States currency was superseded by the Federal Reserve. And while I'm not going to really talk a lot about the specific history of that, I'm going to talk about some things much older than that they're going to put a new context and a new clarity around things like the US dollar and the Federal Reserve's US dollar note. Whether in a coin or a paper bill or whatever, the root of all money is evil. Now, I don't mean what you think I mean, but what you may think I mean when I say evil, but I mean briefly is the things that you have been told not to do, the behaviors you have been told not to take, not to practice. That's the root of all money. So now I'm going to begin reading the content of the blog. Money can be very useful. Money allows for reliable access to things of value. Paper money only has value when there is an organization enforcing its value. If the organization ceases to function to enforce the value of the paper money has no value, no purchasing power. Like with the Confederate dollar when the Confederacy collapsed, or like with a casino's tokens when the casino stops operating as a business. The enforcing of the value of money involves force, like arrests, evictions, repossessions, foreclosures, levies, garnishments, and so on. We could even add wars and annexations and liberations and occupations and colonizations. When there is a revolution, like in Cuba, or when the U.S. invaded Iraq or Vietnam or Korea, etc., then that new pattern of force can change the possession of property from an old owner to a new owner through a new redistribution of wealth, as well as through destruction and death, and then whoever's left after various people are killed gets to claim whatever property hasn't been destroyed, whatever's left. Coins, casino tokens, oil, gold mines, and so on. Once a conflict is concluded and one group is victorious, then they have possession of whatever, depending on the terms of the surrender, if there is any surrender and if there is any survivors. So, the enforcing of the value of money involves force. And revolutions and invasions can produce changes in who possesses what. And such invasions and revolutions will influence the enforcement of the prior currency systems of organized violence in that location, whether that's Cuba or Iraq or Vietnam or Korea, Texas, whatever. Similar to when the Union Army defeated the U.S. Confederacy Army, or the Army of the Confederate States of America, and the prior currency system of the Confederacy ceased to operate. So there was a currency system, and there's a Confederate coin from 1861. And when the Confederacy no longer operated, as in when the Union took over, when the Union Army defeated the Confederacy, then the prior currency system of the Confederacy ceased to operate. Now, that, I believe, is I'm not sure if that's a half-dollar coin of the Confederate States of America. Looking at the face side of it, so I can't tell what it is, but I think it's actual silver, and it could have been melted down and would have had some value. But if you had a paper currency of the Confederacy, once the Confederacy ceased to operate, there might be no exchange value for that piece of paper. So, in summary so far, currency systems are systems of organized violence. Without the court system or the governing system to establish the viability of a piece of paper, or even to enforce the acceptability of a particular coin, there's no currency system. It's not a currency. You can say, well, here's an ounce of silver, or here's a gallon of gasoline, but the substance itself isn't a currency system. It's just some substance of a particular weight and of a particular, concentration and all that. But a currency system means that there is a specific organization who's specifically creating a currency unit, a specific unit, not just, well, here's a chunk of gold or a chunk of silver or a container with some gas in it. How much gas? Is it verified by the court system? And all that kind of thing. Can you make a piece of paper or a coupon that's redeemable for that amount of gasoline or that amount of silver or gold or whatever? So, even when dictators, called kings, instituted systems of claiming various amounts of wealth from various other people, the establishment of a particular new currency as the lawful money or coin of the realm was based on the actual operation of organized violence upon which the claims of tax liability were enforced. So, claims of tax liability were made up in words with organized violence to back them, and then the statements of the exact rates of the tax rate and so forth. Well, those were separate issues, or those were distinct issues. There was the basic fundamental issue of the organized violence system, and then they would say, here's the exchange rate. You need to get 5 gold coins from us. Here's the rate we will exchange those gold coins for your livestock or your produce. The people were more or less forced to exchange the livestock and produce for the coins. Then, after which they bought the coins from the government, then they would give the coins back to the government as tax. So if that sounds a little bit shady, a little bit like extortion or racketeering, that's because it is. All right. So no one already wanted to give up a bunch of livestock or produce for a little shiny coin or a casino token that would be accepted at any of the dictator's court outlets or casino locations, or a piece of paper. The masses gave up those useful things like livestock and produce for these currencies because of the threat of violence if they did not pay taxes or other tribute. And the only way to pay those taxes was to buy the coins or tokens or currency of the dictator from the dictator's outlets or agents and at the exchange rates set by the dictator. So obviously a competing dictator or operation of a currency system of organized violence could influence or even overthrow a particular currency system, as when the U.S. Confederacy seceded or was defeated. Actually, seceded may be the terminology used by the winner of that dispute. Maybe the Confederacy was attempting to continue to operate under the Articles of Confederation from 1777, while the Union was claiming authority under the later Constitution of 1789. But those kind of details don't really matter. Whoever wins the war gets to say, well, here's what was legitimate. So maybe secede was the term that the Union used to label their colonial targets' disloyalty. Like if the UN invaded China on the basis that China was seceding from the UN without getting proper permission from the UN. Or consider if the UN invaded the US, based allegedly on the US threatening to secede or withdraw from the UN. So these kinds of mythologies or historical rationalizations or justifications, those are secondary to the actual winning of the war or defeating of one system of organized violence by another system of organized violence. They get to dictate which currencies and what exchange rates will be operating. They create systems of taxation, also known as extortion or racketeering. But those would be unlicensed operations of extortion and racketeering. Licensed and legitimate ones are taxation. Other ones are criminal. So why is it that the various currency enforcement systems of organized violence have used various substances as the selected material for minting a coin of the realm? Silver and gold have long been used as currencies. These substances were relatively durable, at least if alloyed with other metals, and were also rare. That is, it was not easy for just anyone to find a lot of gold, at least not in the places where gold was used as a currency, or it wouldn't have been used there. When large new sources of gold and silver from the American continent upset exchange rates in Europe and threatened the monopolies of the kings and various monarchies, such as during the California gold rush around 1849, when the Spanish Empire was drawing so many precious metals from their North American colonial exploits, that really shifted the balance of power in Europe. So anyway, new currency systems that did not use those substances were naturally explored, developed, and established by the folks who no longer really had the kind of monopoly that they wanted to maintain. So if they couldn't maintain it through gold or through silver, then they would look for other systems, other methods for influencing the behavior of the masses, all rooted in organized violence, but by way of court systems and currency systems and minting of coins and all that. So the value to the operator of the system of organized violence for using things that were hard to get, like gold and silver, was that access to the gold or silver mines could be monopolized, could be controlled, it could be taken over by the military dictators. If they would assemble an army and take over all the local mines in their area, then they could strictly limit the supply of minted coin of the realm. Again, they got to set the exchange rates and all that, so if they have control of the supply of gold and they dictate the exchange rate based on threats of organized violence, then that is a stable currency system. So these military dictators would strictly limit the supply because they were the only ones with the technology and organization to monopolize access to mines, to melt the metals and mint the coins, and of course to force the populace to exchange perfectly good livestock or produce for little casino tokens or coins of the realm or lawful money, whatever you want to call it. Next, unlike casinos, which may operate against other nearby casinos, governments violently discourage competition. Governments create criminal codes that criminalized unlicensed racketeering, aka unlicensed taxation, as in extortion. Governments also create criminal codes that criminalize unlicensed creation of money, called counterfeiting. So these criminal codes are enforced by organized violence. Similarly, if someone tried to break in or trespass on the government's mines and steal some unminted metal, that would still be punished by organized violence, such as prompt execution. So property rights, that all has to do with the threat of violence. So once the consistent nature of all currency systems and governments is clear, there's the additional subject of propaganda, and here's where we get to the root of all money being evil. Just as governments can declare that a neighboring geographical region is attempting to secede and must be annexed to ensure for the freedom of the populace there, like the U.S. or the UN announced that it is invading or occupying or liberating the U.S. in its entirety, or even just Texas, like the U.S. previously liberated Texas from Mexico. Well, then governments can also declare unlicensed operations of organized violence to be criminal, corrupt, evil, immoral, and so on. What is evil? Whatever the dictators dictate is evil. It's evil for people who are not dictators to do those things. The dictators obviously are doing those things. So one of the most universal taboos of propaganda would be propaganda itself. While organized violence is terrible, according to propaganda, nothing is quite so vile as propaganda. Anti-propaganda, propaganda, is essential for most any other propaganda to be accepted. If the masses go around creating and publicize competing systems of propaganda, that can be very unfavorable for the economic interests or national security of a particular operation of organized violence. In other words, a currency system. So, by the way, here's an image of apparently a real gold coin, but it was counterfeit in so far as to the best of my knowledge, it was not issued by the Confederate States of America. Perhaps it was issued by the Union as part of their various efforts to undermine or overthrow or conquer the Confederate States of America. But anyway, it was actual gold, apparently. But if you took, say, $8 worth of gold and made it into a coin and said, okay, that's worth $20, and then you issue it into circulation in the South, and you use it to do things like, buy food from the Southerners or the Confederate state locals, you're swindling them. You're giving them, $8 worth of gold in exchange for $20 worth of whatever. So that was a possibility in the novelty and confusion of the early 1860s. That may have been what happened. I really don't know. Anyway, once propaganda is monopolized, then various branches of propaganda can announce that they are unrelated. For instance, the churches and the media outlets can all issue statements declaring the separation of church and media. Further, the government and the public school system can issue statements that they are entirely isolated operations. Or they can formally merge and say, okay, now governments are taking over the religious institutions, and we now are officially funding them and regulating them and so forth. So actually, propaganda may not even really focus on certain issues. It doesn't need to focus on anti-propaganda, propaganda. You may not even really see that. Propaganda has to be believable, and it's used for a variety of ways, but I mentioned a couple of things here, ironically, as far as believable propaganda, such as the saying, "a war to end all wars," which is obviously a continuing of war. Or peacekeeping missiles, or peacekeeping mercenaries. Peacekeeping bombs. So, if the masses can be distracted and confused in regard to enough issues of hysterical drama and controversy and urgency and scandal, then it may not be required to indoctrinate the masses specifically to be morally repulsed, as in ashamed or terrified, by any mention of the possibility of the existence of propaganda. Note that moral repulsion is trained, and that is terror, and that is shame. It means don't do that behavior. Don't even think about it. Don't even talk about it. It's shameful. It's terrifying. Why? Because we'll punish you or jail you or kill you or whatever. We'll harm you, injure you if you mention it. That's the root of all evil. So the masses may be adequately trained to be reactively outraged about new revelations, like press releases, concerning how a particular currency system has been recently discovered to be a racketeering fraud from the start, such as the Federal Reserve, or how a particular government has been accused of being an operation of organized violence from the start, such as the Holy Roman Empire or the Soviet Union, or the government of Cuba, or how a particular politician is accused of being corrupt or manipulative or just a little bit too preoccupied with PR and public perception. The masses, in order to be properly influenced or governed in terms of their perceptions and behavior, can be propagandized about morality, criminality, spirituality, and so on. Currency, government, legitimate government, violence, propaganda, all that. Finally, let's do another metaphor. Consider the global diamond cartel, De Beers. They may have used deceit and blackmail and violence and so on to establish and maintain control of the supply of diamonds worldwide. They hired a couple decades into their existence, they hired Edward Bernays, a famous propagandist, to help them place their products in movies, even having movies written around the entire subject of an emotionally moving scene in which the handsome leading man presents a huge diamond to the female lead actress as he asks her to marry him, the actor. After dozens and dozens of movies repeating this theme of a female lead actress being receptive after being offered some large piece of diamond jewelry, then Bernays arranged to have the actresses and eventually the British royal family to wear elaborate diamond jewelry at press events where the media photographers were prepared and instructed to photograph them in their diamonds and take pictures where it showed off the diamonds, and it would even say the dress this actress is wearing is from such and such, and the diamond necklace is from such and such. And they would let the actresses keep the diamond jewelry as basically their payment to be part of the scam or the media event, the hype event, whatever you want to call it. So, of course, it is all a scam, as in an advertising campaign or propaganda campaign. It's like any other propaganda campaign or advertising campaign to at least some extent. Diamonds were not widely available until recent centuries. They're not traditionally associated with marriage or engagement. There's no inherent connection between romance or getting married or sexual receptivity and diamonds. The connection was indoctrinated onto the masses of moviegoers and then swiftly accepted by the culture overall. Similarly, if De Beers had the military capacity to dictate to the various governments of the world that those governments owed De Beers taxes of 75 million carats of diamond per year, a certain weight of carat of diamonds, that would be a lot like how kings dictated systems of currency onto their target populations. De Beers could then dictate the exchange rate between officially acceptable units of diamonds relative to ounces of gold, barrels of oil, bushels of corn, whatever, head of cattle. Again, that pattern of precisely parallels the origin of all currency systems of organized violence. Dictators say if the standard of value is gold or diamonds or whatever thing for which they control the supply, such as crude oil. If the dictators can maintain a system of organized violence to enforce the exchange rate that they set, then the exchange rate persists, the currency system persists at that exchange rate, and so on, as long as no other competing military operation comes in to replace a currency system or court system, and as long as the currency system or court system continues to function and operate and is stable, then there you go. Exchange rates will change over time in many cases, just as organizations last, from decades to centuries, but ultimately currency systems come and go, court systems come and go, governments like the Confederate States of America, they come and go. Or they, get superseded and the European Union swallows up a bunch of previously sovereign entities. In closing, let's review the origin of the word dollar. It refers to a particular amount of silver. The dollar, T-H-A-L-E-R. It's also spelled a couple different ways. The dollar was a silver coin used throughout Europe for almost 400 years. Its name lives on in various currencies as the dollar or dollar. That's dollar with a D or taler with a T, and originally it was spelled T-H-A-L-E-R, dollar, with a T-H, dollar. Etymologically, thaler is an abbreviation of a longer word, and the word Dal is German for valley, so a dollar is a person or thing from the valley, kind of like Frankfurter is a thing from Frankfurt. Wiener is a thing from Wien or Vienna. Hamburger is a thing from Hamburg, from the city of Hamburg. So, below, the final image I mentioned before, a piece of paper currency of an organization that previously operated a sovereign currency system of organized violence, which no longer functions independently. That organization is called the United States of America, which was functionally superseded by the Federal Reserve in 1933. So that piece of paper would have been redeemable. It was a silver certificate or coupon. It would have been redeemable for a silver dollar coin from the United States of America, payable to the bearer on demand, an actual silver dollar. Anybody who bears that piece of paper and demands a silver dollar gets that silver dollar coin from the United States of America and its agents or outlets. And that image is from an article I wrote in 2005 in which I detailed the future of the U.S. economy as rising fuel prices would continue to rise. And eventually those rising fuel prices would pinch or pop the economy of the U.S. and of the U.K. I didn't mention it so much in that article, but would do the same thing it had been doing in Japan since 1989 to the U.S. That is, it being rising fuel prices would pinch or pop the economy. And that would slow credit trends, as in borrowing and lending. That would decrease real estate prices and stock prices and produce many other predictable results, as indicated there in that article, which I link, and the various developments of the last few years that many people would assert and have been unpredictable, or at least that they didn't predict them, and have been surprising, again, that they didn't predict them, so they were surprised. Those things all happened as I indicated they would in that 2005 article and in prior articles in some cases as well. Certainly there are many other authors besides myself that I had read in 2002, 3, 4, 5, and so on that indicated some or all of the same things that I indicated. We just noticed them early. We noticed some things clearly and noticed them earlier than other people noticed them or accurately interpreted them or analyzed them, or whatever you want to call it. So certainly people who are listening to this are welcome to contact me about some of the possible adaptations in behavior to the emerging economic situation, especially as one shifts in one's perspective about economics, financial systems, currency systems, even language and propaganda relating to what is evil or what is effective, what is appealing. You're also welcome to make comments and replies on the blog or on the YouTube video. Thank you.